Okay, yeah. So I should be visible along with my iPad. So this is what we're doing today. We're done with all the November 2024 session paper twos. Today we are on to the March series. Now remember, March series is, although meant only for exams taking place in India, but they perhaps are the best guide as to what you might see in your exams in June. So what I mean by that is the sort of questions, and that means the way the questions are presented, the amount of information, the amount of detail, or what are the more likely topics that CIE is testing you on this time around. The February exam is a very good indicator of that. So what I do recommend, even for this year, I've already gotten hold of paper two. I'm still hoping paper one should come in my possession soon. So once I have that, I will share those with you, and just make sure that you do the February paper just before you go into your exams. It'll be good practice. So this is obviously from last year, so we can use this one. This is March 2024, paper 22. Remember, there's only one variant available in March, so that's the one you use. And I do recommend that you do all March ones. They're the same as any other session, June or November. Okay, so as we always do, where I've picked one of the case studies. Remember, there are two case studies. When you see your paper two, you'll have 1 hour and 30 minutes, which definitely you divide it into half. So you get 45 minutes per case study. The trend that I've usually seen is that students take extra care with the first case study, making sure that you get it right. The 12 marker might be a little bit more detailed. So you may end up taking more than 45 minutes in the first one, which makes you push a little bit when you come to the second case study, and especially in the last question, which would be a 12 marker. So again, the point of telling you that is it's to understand that you need to practice at home with the time management allocation. So 45 minutes per case study, put a timer, and then start attempting a full case study. Okay. So let me take you to the paper that I've picked for today. And this one is the second case study in this paper. And it's called ML Computers. Just give me a second, guys. Yeah. So this is the second case study in this paper called MLC, and both case studies are the same in the sense that you will have some information given in some tables or maybe a chart, and that's basically the quantitative bit that you need for your calculation. But most of the case study is obviously written in words. You'll have paragraphs, and they will be obviously focused on different parts of a business. Something that you need to be absolutely sure of is that you are tested on your entire syllabus in paper two, which means that across the two case studies in each paper, you will see that all 5 units are represented. So you'll see information on marketing, operation, finance, HR, business, and its environment. And the questions will also range across all those 5 units. So take nothing for granted. Don't take any chances with your preparation. Make sure you have all your content fully revised before going into paper two. And so this is the case study. Let me show you the questions that I picked for today. So when you get to the bottom of it, you will see the four parts: A, B, C, and D. What I have picked for today is part A, part B, and part D. So we won't be doing part C. I'll be looking at a 12-mark question, which is obviously an evaluate question. We'll be looking at a calculation, which will be B part one, and A part one is an identify or explain question. Okay. Now, the way to go about it is always read the question first and then read the case study. The reason for that is that you want to know exactly what are the things that you should be highlighting when you're reading the case study. And those things are basically determined by what the information will be asked of you in the questions. So, for example, when I look at the first one, it talks about identifying one secondary market research source and explaining the term leasing. Now, part A is something that you can answer without connecting it to the case study. If you want, you can, but it doesn't need to be meant. It doesn't need to be something that's part of the case study itself. So this is just testing your knowledge. And these are pretty easy marks to score on. And when we get to this part, I'll show you how to do them correctly. Then B part one will be a calculation, and obviously you'll be given reference to a table, maybe some other information, and we'll be looking to calculate labor turnover. Then part C, we're not doing that, so let's forget about it for now. Part D is evaluate whether MLC should change from a private limited company to a public limited company. So when you read this, the big change that they're making is converting themselves to a public limited company. So anytime in the case study you see any information that could be even remotely linked to a discussion of public limited company, you make a note of it or you highlight it. So there would be things such as wherever they're discussing control, wherever they're discussing finance, wherever they're discussing something like existing shareholder, new shareholders, right issue, market capitalization, and board of directors. So anytime that sort of information is there, you make a note of it because you might need it as application in your answers later on. Okay. So if there are no questions at this point, I want to get into the case study now. And the four things, and I keep repeating this with all paper twos, is that there are four things that you need to make a note of or highlight anytime you see it in a paper two case study. First of those is, yeah, that's better. So first of those is the business structure. And actually, our question is about that as well, right? They're changing from a private limited company to a public limited company. So we already know that the structure is a private limited company. Secondly, the product that they're selling. Mass market, niche market, what kind of product is it? It just gives you a better understanding of the marketing of things. Then their distribution channel, whether they are B2B or they are B2C, because the way you promote it to B2B is different from B2C. The actual product itself is different between B2B and B2C. So that is something that helps you to see how many channels you have for distribution. And lastly, if the objective of the business or if the mission statement of the business is given to you, because your evaluation should always come back to the objective, which means that if you suggest something in your answers and if it's in line with the company's objective, then you bring it in your discussion. And look, this is what the company wants to achieve anyway, so that's why I'm saying that they should be doing this. Or if you do something that's going against the objective, then you mention it that, look, this might create problems later on because we are going against what the objective is. So that's how you basically balance out your objective discussion. Okay, so the structure, product, distribution channel, and objective. And with that, let's get into it. So MLC is a successful private limited company that has been trading for 20 years in country K. So straight off the bat, we have our first piece of information that they are a private limited company. Now, what that tells us is that the ownership is amongst just a few people. The money is coming from few people also, but the profit is also being distributed to this little group of people, friends, family, trusted employees, other kind of people who become shareholders in a private limited company. The company makes a range of laptop computers. And again, we have our second piece of information. The kind of product that they're selling is laptop computers. It is the market leader in a highly competitive market. So what's a telling piece of information is that they operate in a highly competitive market, which means innovation would be key, which means competitive pricing would be key, which means that you will have to fight with suppliers over raw materials. So those are the things that they have to face if they are to do well. And they seem to be doing well because they are already market leaders in that industry. Now, MLC is developing a new touchscreen computer that will use the latest technology. Now, even there isn't yet a discussion of private to public limited company, but we know that the direction of the company is that they're looking for expansion, right? They're looking to develop. And any form of development of a new product needs finance, and that's where you might need the conversion to a public limited company. This paper is 2024 March. The only variant in that is paper 2.2. And this is the second case study of it. Okay, so initially, secondary market research was carried out, followed by primary research. Usually, this is the pattern that companies take anyways, right? If you don't have a lot of money or if you don't want to spend a lot of money on this yet, then you first go conduct secondary research and you see what everybody else is saying. And just to confirm what your findings are, you go and conduct a little bit of primary so that we also find out, directly whether what we saw in secondary research was right or wrong. So that's what they're doing here. The market research data suggested a high potential demand for the new touchscreen computer. So this is something that is driving them to become bigger. There's a potential demand that's created for touchscreen computers, and if there's a demand, then it should be fulfilled by a business that can. And clearly, MC is a laptop computer manufacturer, so they can fulfill this demand. The marketing director is planning the launch of the new touchscreen computer using price skimming. Now, we already know price skimming is to set the price higher than the market average. You're doing that because this is a new piece of technology. It's a competitive market. You want to make more money before the competitors copy it and then start making money as well. So that's why you basically try to make all the money in the first few months. All computers are made in MLC's two factories in country K. Operations are capital intensive, as you would expect. Operations are capital intensive. New machinery is needed to manufacture the new touchscreen computer. So, new machinery is needed. Again, something to do with finance being required, and maybe that's something that you can link to public limited companies. So, what you might do at this point is maybe sort of write a little note here, PLC. So, this is linked to public limited companies. There is potential high demand. You can use this to justify your conversion to a public limited company. So this is how basically you keep going and start collecting little pieces of information which you will use as application in your answers. Now, Maria, the managing director, decided to use leasing for the new machinery. Now, we already know there's a defined question of leasing, so we'll get to it at that point. MLC has 350 employees. One of its objectives, now this isn't all of them, but one of their objectives is to reduce labor turnover to 8% by 2026. So we can sort of highlight that, look, this is something that they're looking to do, reduce their labor turnover. And obviously you do that because you want to improve the motivation levels, you want to retain your best workers. You also want to not have to spend on recruitment, so you save that money as well by having a lower labor turnover. Now, labor turnover rates currently vary across the two factories. The labor turnover of factory A is currently 14%. Table 2.1 shows some employee data for factory B. And you're given some number errors, and obviously we'll have to calculate labor turnover, so we'll get to it when we get to the calculation part. Now, Maria is the majority shareholder with 55% of shares. Now, this is definitely a sort of discussion that you would have when you are converting from a private to a public limited company, because the biggest shareholder has the biggest say. And we already know that there is one person clearly who has the majority stake. So she will have the final say of whether we should do it or we shouldn't do it. She is concerned. So already we're seeing the opposition might come from Maria, right? So she is concerned about the future growth of the company. Over the next 3 years, she plans to launch 5 new computers using the latest technology. So if this is the plan to launch 5 new computers with the latest technology, you will need money, you will need more help, you will need a bigger organization. So all of that means that you may not have a choice but to convert to a public limited company. At a recent board meeting, Maria proposed that the company changes the ownership of the business to a public limited company. So this is where the final part is, that she has already proposed that we should go ahead and change to a public limited company. And when the question is asking us that discuss this change, you don't discuss private limited companies' advantages and disadvantages, right? Because that they already are. What the questions asked you in part D, I'll show you again in a minute, that what happens when you become a public limited company. So the answer is going to be about 70% revolving around the pros and cons of becoming a public limited company for MLC. So that's the case. That's the information that we have. Anything that you'd like me to discuss before we go on to the answers, or are we all okay? All right, seems to be all okay. This is March 2024, paper 2.2, second case study in it. Okay, So let's get into it. So what I've done is, as you see, these are the three questions that I'm about to do, part A, B, and D. And I've just brought them here on the other side. So just the same questions, just using them in this space. So when you maybe probably not. I'm not sure. Let me go through it one by one, but I don't think we will probably need it. So the way to answer any question, right? So you start answering, you look at A part one. The first thing that you do is you look at the marks that are associated with it. So this is 1 mark. Anytime you see a 1 mark question, it will be an identify question. And what they're asking you to identify is one secondary research source. Okay. So this could be one word, it could be a couple of words. It should not be a definition of that source or a definition of what secondary market research is. So yeah, all the ones that you are mentioning here, for example, government publications, so government data, that could be good enough. Or you could mention, let's say, magazines. One thing that you cannot mention, okay, this would be wrong, is simply mentioning internet. Okay, internet is a very, very vast space. So you need to be more more accurate about where on. So social media is again very broad as a term. Okay, you should say something like Google Analytics. Right, so that's something particularly that you get from the internet. So this would be right, but just mentioning internet or just mentioning social media might not be okay. Newspaper might be fine. That's also fine. So go try not to use short forms. I just use it just to save time, but don't take liberties with it. Write the whole thing. Okay. So this is what you have to do in a 1 marker. This is the easiest mark you're going to get in your exam. So just know what you have to do with it. 1 or 2 words. No more than that. Just do it and simply move on. Okay. Then you get to A part B, which is a 3 mark question. And a 3 mark question will be an explain question. And this question should have just sort of 3 things to say about the concept, and it should have this sequence, right? So the how this one is different from paper 1 3 marker is that in paper 1 3 mark questions we do not define it, absolutely not. But in a 3 mark paper 2 question, which is the one that we see here, you must define it. So the knowledge here will definitely be us defining what leasing is. So leasing is a method or is a source of finance, right? So excuse me, leasing, first of all, that you mentioned, is a source of finance, and it is provided by banks, and companies use it. I guess I should use it in the second part. So knowledge, just mentioned, this is a source of finance that you can easily get from banks and on monthly installments. Yeah, that might do it. That's a good one. um, you don't have to refer it, but you can. Okay, so if you want to say, for example, when um, uh, Maria is buying the machinery for new touchscreen laptop, she uses leasing so that she doesn't have to pay all the money upfront. So you can explain it like that, and that will be perfectly fine. Or you could just simply mention that businesses use it so that they don't have an immediate cash outlay and they can use that to make other investments and such. So the choice is yours. Let me show you how it's done with the case, and obviously without the case, it's easy. So for example, if you were to mention MLC here, we would say that MLC, they need a new machinery, right? They went to a bank, they offered them leasing, which meant there was low initial cash outlay, right? And what that leads to, remember, you need to bring another layer of application here, is that you have a lower capital cost, right? Which makes it easy payments, which is good for your cash flow. You can mention it like this. Yeah, so about the three markers difference between P1 and P2 is that in a 3-mark question in paper 1, you never define the term, right? So we've mentioned one advantage or one factor or such thing. But in a 3-mark question from paper 2, the first line of knowledge must be a definition. Okay, so you have to explain the concept and give its full definition and then tell them how it might be used in a business. So this is what you could do. Okay, good. Everybody understand that? I hope we're cool. Okay. Yeah, so if you're all okay, let's move on. And this is your calculation, the only calculation question in each case. So you'll have 2 calculation questions. They'll be about 3 marks each. You'll be attempting for 6. So 6 out of 60, that's about 10% of your paper 2 is basically calculation. And you must practice it over and over and over. Yeah, Michelle, that's correct. So this question says, and the big clue is when you're reading the calculation question, just read the first part bit really carefully. This one says refer to table 2.1 and other information. Okay. Now, whenever they mention and other information, it means that there must be a number somewhere outside the table 2.1, which you will have to use in your calculations. So this is the clue that don't just focus on table 2.1. You need something from around that table as well. And what they're asking you to do is calculate the difference in labor turnover between factory A and factory B. So why don't we do a sort of like a quick checkup of your understanding of labor turnover. If this is the information, if the question was given to you, could you tell me the difference in labor turnover between factory A and factory B? Yeah, BB, I think that's fine. What you've written is also fine. Yeah, 1.5 seems to be the number here. Are we all in agreement? So we already have it for factory A, right? Which is 14%. All you got to do is calculate this using these numbers. Okay, so let me show you how it's done in case you're still wondering. Let me take you to the other side. Here you go. So we already know that factory A has a labor turnover of 14%. Now we need to find out for B labor turnover, which is number of uh, workers left divided by total workers into 100. So this was 25 over 200 to 100. I think the number was 12.5. Yeah, thank you. 12.5%. Okay. Now, if you just calculate this, you'll only get 2 marks. So what you need to do now to get full marks is to find the difference, which is basically done here, 14 minus 12.5, which is 1.5% is the difference between factory A and factory B. Okay, for example, in the recent mocks, there was a similar question. You had to find the difference, and a lot of students calculated the first two, but they didn't do this difference or addition that you had to do. So make sure that you understand and read the question. If it's asking you for a difference, the two numbers must be deducted from one another. Okay. That's the way to do this. Hope you're all okay. I'll move on again. If there's a question, just type it in the chat window. Now, B part two is always in a way linked with B part one. So you've already calculated labor turnover, and then B part two asks you for this. Okay. Now again, this would be a 3-mark question. You'll be asked to explain. And what I always recommend here is that you, if you remember, when we attempt 8 and 12-mark questions, we divide our question into knowledge, application, and analysis, right? So if you can do that here, it's going to help you a lot. And then this one, since it's a 3-marker, we know that for a 3-marker, you need 1 up for knowledge, you need 2 for application. And in this one, uh, you look to identify MLC having lower labor turnover. How is that an advantage for them? And the way to answer this is that, and again, this is a big change between paper one and paper two. In paper one, you get to come up with your own situation, develop your own business and such. But in paper two, you must talk about the business that's in question, which is MLC. So when I say, when they ask us one advantage of labor turnover, if I simply say that, oh, it means that you will have less recruitment cost, or you'll have more motivated workforce, you'll have a better company culture, that just by itself is a very generic answer. You have to tell us how MLC as a company benefits. So that element of application must be in your answers. So in this one, first you start with a bit of knowledge, right? And then you will go into the rest of your answer. And let me just take you back to the case study for a minute and just remind ourselves of what they're looking to do. So they have 350 workers. They want to bring it down to 8%. They're both of their factories, 14%, 12.5%. Clearly, they are under the objective that they set for themselves. So one thing that I can show in my answer is that if they're able to bring the current labor turnover, which is 12.5%, lower, they might get closer to achieving their objective of 8% by 2026. So this allows me to bring in an application, also talk about their objective, and use the number that I've just calculated as well. So that's sort of the sweet midpoint that you have to find in your answer, that you also talk about the number and you also talk about the impact it will have on the business. Okay. So here, let me give you two versions. Okay. First one, I would say that it reduces recruitment. And someone, I think just, yeah, Maliha just mentioned training cost. So that's one way that you could frame your answer, that look, if you have few people leaving, and here I would mention that MLC has 350 workers. And if they're able to reduce their labor turnover, they might be able to achieve their objective of less than 8% labor turnover. Okay, so just a couple of layers, also making the business the center point of your answer, the situation, the number of workers and such things. So if you can do that, that's when you have the right answer in your exams. So this is one way I could do this. Secondly, I could have just mentioned, and let me use a different color for it. I could have also mentioned that it improves the company culture, right? Or it attracts top talent from across the industry. And you can develop this point, then look, they can bring in the best workers who work with touchscreen computers in other companies. And that way you can have a great new product that you can sell in the upcoming years. So again, it's up to you to determine which knowledge you want to talk about, and whichever one you talk about, then you layer it out over the next 2 lines. Everybody okay with this? This part, B part one and B part two? Okay, good, good, good. To be honest with you, this one's quite seems like an easy sort of case study so far. Didn't understand the company culture point. So, company culture means that everybody is happy with the way the company is treating them, and they're also paying them back by not leaving the company. So, it's just a nice place to work. And if they reduce their labor turnover, it means that they've done something to motivate them, and which means that people are happy, and that develops into a good sort of a company culture to work around. So that's something, and it's important to have a company culture when you're looking to grow. So you can mention that here, that she's becoming a public limited company, that she needs a good corporate culture, and a corporate culture is maintained by having a low labor turnover. Low LTO means low labor turnover. Yeah, so basically, a motivation would mean they'll be ready to share ideas, be more efficient with their work, and that's what develops into a good company culture, right? All the people working towards the company's primary objectives. So I guess you can say that at the back of it, there's motivation. Yeah. Okay, cool, cool, cool. So that takes care of these two here. So I'm going to check them off. This is done. This is done. Now we get to part D. And this is where we'd already done a bit of background work when we were reading the case study, because the question asked us what happens if MLC changes from being a private limited to a public limited company, right? That's the ending statement in this case study. So everything before this is usable. And what we got to do now is go through the list and see where did we find things that A can be used for public and private, public limited advantages and disadvantages, and B, is there anything that helps us to come to a conclusion about whether this is a good idea or not? Okay. Now, as always, whenever you see a 5 marker, 8 mark, or 12 mark question, the first thing you do is you divide it into its requirements. And once again, I've just brought the question here over to this side so it's easy for me to answer it. Just give me a second and let me fix it. Yeah. So this is our question. Evaluate whether MLC should change from a private limited company to a public limited company. Okay. So help me out here. Which word or which words in there are indicating that this is the knowledge that you got to show in your answer? This is a 12 marker. This is just the wrong number. I hope my TA is listening and watching this. She's in the next room. Let me just tell her. I love correcting mistakes. गलती मिल गई है. Anyway, so this is a 12-mark question, I assure you. And so there's a few private and public. Yeah, so absolutely right. So things that you can define in here are, are private limited company, right? Or public limited company. But whenever there's a conversion, so it's going from one to the other, your focus is always on what they are going to become rather than what they have been in the past. So here in this question, definitely the word private limited, sorry, public limited would constitute as knowledge. Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of comments suddenly. Yeah, so PLC, yeah, Lord would have. Yeah, this answer is fine, VB. I think it's good. So public, yeah. What about application? What situation? Remember application. So listen to this first. In P1, application is the business, right? In P2, application is a particular situation within that business, a moment, a decision, a scenario that might have occurred. So or a change that's occurring. So it's very good, right? Very good. Arva. So here, what they're doing is they're looking to change from a private limited to a public limited company. Okay, so what you have to talk about is the transition phase, that what happens and what do you become. So you have to evaluate wherever there's anything that might impact. For example, a company is looking to buy new machinery and they've already tried out leasing and they want more machinery to go into further production. Right now, that's where you know that if you become a public limited company, you'll have more money available and vast sums of money available. So that's something that you bring into your answers application. And look, they need machinery, they want to make new touchscreen laptops, and the reasons that there's already high demand and we've gone through primary and secondary research. Secondary would have been free, but primary would have still taken you some obviously money, so you already spend on it, it's a sunk cost. So the change itself and what you become is the application in this answer, in this question. What's analysis? There's only a few words left. Literally, there are 4 words left. So whether MLC should change or not, right? And what that simply means is tell us how will they benefit. So the advantages of becoming a public limited, or nice try, Vishal, or the disadvantages of becoming a public limited company. So whether they should doing anything or not depends on what you get out of it and what you lose from it, right? So and that's basically what analysis is. So benefits or advantages of the change in structure. Very good, Fatma. And then evaluation is obviously evaluation. So give us your judgment. Look at other things in the case study and tell us, uh, or no marks for that, but you'll still be credited. But so yeah, evaluation is, do you think it's a good idea or not? Should they stay private limited? Should they become? Don't, and again, this is a mistake I see a lot of students make in P2 evaluation, especially, is that they sit on the fence. They say, oh, they can become a private limited, but they can also remain a public limited, and maybe they should look at different things because it depends, right? It's just not good enough, that sort of an answer. You need to be firm and decisive in your recommendation. Yes, they should become public limited company because A, B, C reasons. However, when you're becoming public limited, this is something that might come as the biggest challenge for you, so watch out for it, right? That sort of a final evaluation is perfectly fine. So the way I structure, now that we know what each word tells us, so we have to choose a side. So Mishal, you don't have to choose a side in the sense that you don't have to say I recommend or in my opinion. What you say is, in evaluation, public becoming a public limited company seems like a good idea, right? So it's not saying you go do it, but it's saying this seems the right thing for me to do, and so that's your tone rather than I recommend it, period. Okay. So when I attempt 12 mark answers, the way I divide it is I take three um, largely same length of my paragraphs, and each one is, for the first one, you go knowledge, application analysis, and third a bit of evaluation. You finish that, you go again into this, another knowledge, application analysis, evaluation, very good, Urva, and then you reserve your final one for evaluation. Okay. Now, since this question, remember, in fact, any evaluation question must have both advantages and disadvantages. So you could divide the first one into the positives, you could divide the second one into negatives, and then this is where you give your uh, not decision, I shouldn't say decide, you should um, reason reason with it towards the end. So XYZ company should do this, and then the benefits, and this is yeah, basically, and then follow that up with a judgment that is this the right thing to do or not. That's coming basically your own understanding of the concept. Okay, and again, just as these things come to my mind, I say them out. Make sure that you talk about the business. Okay, I've seen this so many times. The students read this, oh, they want to talk about private to public limited company. They explain all the right points, but if the application is in there, you're not going to get the full marks for it. So make sure you refer it to the business. The context must always be there. No, so you will only mention the public limited advantages and disadvantages, right? When you're a paper two question, treat it like the business has come to you, you're the consultant, and the business person is telling you, look, we want to become a public limited company. And your job is now to tell them, is that a good idea or a bad idea? Not evaluating being a private limited company, because they've already been a private limited company for a long time. They don't need to be told whether it works or not. They've been a private limited for 20 years. So your job is to focus on what happens in the future if they become a public limited company. Okay. Right. So let's begin forming this, excuse me, this answer. So as always, it's a good thing to start off with a definition. And I would just start with a definition of a public limited company. Okay. And like I always tell you, don't forget this. Bring in applications straight away after your definition. Don't beat about the bush. So this one, you would say that MLC is right now changing from a private limited company to a public limited company. And what that will do is that it is going to impact finances and the control in MLC. Okay, so you lay down the situation, you lay down the law, you tell the examiner, look, I know what you talk to me about, which is publicly owned company. You also explain to the examiner that I know exactly the situation you want me to talk about, which is the transition from a private to a public. And then you go into your first paragraph, uh, or just mentioning the first line of knowledge. Shouldn't we? So maybe that thing you reserve for the overall evaluation. First, you need to talk about the main point of discussion, which is advantages and disadvantages of converting to a public limit. Okay, and what I would recommend in a question of this type is that pick a couple of advantages, right? For the first paragraph, pick a couple of advantages for the second paragraph, and then go for the evaluation. Okay, so I'm going to do one of them here. You give me one. Which advantage should I talk about first? How about more finances available? Okay, let's say large sums of capital can be raised, right? So limited liability, Malia, I wouldn't mention it because both private and public have that in common. So you only talk about those things that are clearly different between a private and a public limited company. Okay, you won't be credited for limited. So what I would do here, large sums of money, I bring in my application and I tell them that look, they're looking to launch a new uh, touch screen computers. And this is mentioned in the case study, right? So I'm just taking from there. And for that, they've already mentioned that they will need new machinery. And since this is, let me just show you where this was being mentioned. Here. Yeah, over the next 3 years, she plans to launch 5 new computers using the latest technology. And obviously, this technology they mentioned earlier as well in the case that they're looking to buy new machinery, which is obviously going to be used for making touchscreen computers. So there's already a situation where machinery is mentioned. We also say that, look, it's needed for the new lines as well. This is going to be costly. And if you go for this is the application, this is the analysis, right? So if you change to a public limited company, you can sell shares to general public. You have to refer it to general public in this one because that's really the big advantage that public limited company has. Okay. Uh, so when you can sell shares to the public, you can get yes, enough finance to buy new production production lines, production areas, and things like that. And you can look to improve your efficiency, right? And look to reduce your average cost of production. So this is how you can benefit. You can long term, you can reduce the cost of whatever you want to say, and then bring a little bit of evaluation. Again, I just want to mention something that I've only done one knowledge here. You should be doing two. So what you would do is you would do knowledge application analysis. Actually, let me do that. I'll show you how you should be doing it. No cutting shortcuts. Okay, so when you talk about analysis of the first point, just bring in another one here, and that would count as knowledge. And look, yes, you get large sums of money. Economies of scale, yeah, we already talked about. So talk about when you become a public company, what you also get is that higher status, higher status, right? That's what you say. And what you say is that once MLC, since they need new machinery, they can negotiate better interest rate from banks. Remember, a bank would always prefer a public limited company or a private limited company because of its size. And by doing this, right, you can raise capital quickly and basically go to production. Sorry, excuse my handwriting. And basically enter market before rivals do. Remember, they said they're already in a highly competitive market. So, yeah, lower cost of borrowing, that's something that you can mention here. They can maintain their position as the market leader. Absolutely. So you use that point as you feel like you can. Okay. Now, as I again, this was something when I was checking recent mock papers. A lot of students are still not inserting a little bit of evaluation at the end of each paragraph. So, whenever you feel like you've discussed about advantages and disadvantages, then you must have something to say which sounds like an evaluation. Yeah, or so at least two advantages is what you would mention here. Okay. So evaluation, what I'm saying is that look, you can say raise large sums of capital, you can do this quickly, you can negotiate better rates. However, what happens is that when you become a public limited company, the original owners lose control. Okay. And what I can bring in here from the case study is that they already mentioned, yes, VV, in the same paragraph. What in the case study, what they already mentioned is that Maria has 55% of the shares, right? I want to reserve that point for the final evaluation. So what you can say here is that since Maria has 55, then 45% are your other owners, right? And you don't know how would they react. Okay, so that's something that you must keep in mind, that not everybody might be happy that their ownership is now being diluted and then given into the hands of new people. So just a couple of lines in the end. Yeah, so you can say that the all the shareholders may not align on this path going forward for the company. Okay, so that's just another good way to say it. But you must have something to mention. Maybe you can mention it in the final paragraph, I think. You can. You can say that it will also help you to keep your gearing ratio in under manageable levels, something like that. No, Bishal, when I say evaluation, I don't mean that you evaluate each analysis. You evaluate the entire paragraph as one. So notice how I have I can go back to it. So knowledge application analysis, and this whole thing is then evaluated here in these two lines. Okay. All right. So at this point, then I would change my paragraphs as indicated by this poorly drawn dotted line. And then obviously no need to define again, no need to set up the application again. You talk about the disadvantage of becoming a public limited company. And that is very obviously uh, you lose control. Okay. And what I can use here is that right now, Maria makes decisions, right, about the future, and she's decided in the future they're going to do touch screen, right? So just explain that situation. Touch screen computers is what she thinks, but new shareholders might bring in a new board of directors. And the problem with that is that she may have little say in the direction or what new products should be launched, and maybe the new computers may not get launched. So just to sort of explain how loss of control translates into even your future getting out of your hands. Sorry, there's a comment here. What does it say? No, this is the name. Yes, BB, negative points paragraph, you have to mention too. That's right. Sorry, Michelle, this one I meant to write that in the future they are going for touch screen computers. So, yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so that would be one. The other, what's another loss? Oh, yeah, another disadvantage. I can think of one, transparency. So you will have to make your financial information public. But another easy one would be that there is always a risk of, complete my sentence, risk of takeover. Very good. Right? There's always a risk that you might get taken over. Again, you explain that in application that right now Maria has 55%, and you may have a situation where others uh, start buying secretly, and the impact of that would be that you have a loss of control. And just explain that this is something that she's been running for 20 years, 20-year plus old company, right? Gets taken over. So she loses her minute of 20 years. Basically, that's what I'm getting at. Okay. And then once again, make sure you evaluate it towards the end. And what we can mention here is this might lead to current shareholders selling shares selling their shares. And Urva, this is what I'm basically using from what you said. And this might lead to a fall in share price. Remember, when sell, and when they sell in the stock market, they usually sell it for a lower price, and that's where you're seeing if there's a fall in share price, it also leads to a fall in the market cap. Remember market capitalization, which tells you about the size of a public limited company, that also falls with the share price. You will make it sort of a mixed bag. Save some of the big points for the final evaluation, but here just try to mention those things that make sense with what you mentioned in the paragraph. So, what I mentioned is risk of takeover, loss of control, right? This is all directly linked with the current shareholder. So I would definitely mention that. But some part of it, which is the 55% ownership that Maria has, I'm saving that for the final paragraph. So even when you're planning your answer, save the really nice big evaluation points for the final paragraph and use the evaluation of those points within the paragraph at the end of it. Okay? I don't know if that makes sense. Did it? Okay, good. So with this done, now we get to the final evaluation, which is going to about this long. Yeah, again, indicated by this as a change of paragraphs. And as I always do, I will write it in purple. So this is your final evaluation. Okay. Yeah. Scary for the first few times. Once you've done enough sessions, enough papers, well, I'm sure you will get over that. So first thing, and again, I will remind this again that 4 words that I always keep going over when I'm deciding this final paragraph is, can I give a decision? And decision doesn't mean recommend. Decision means this looks better than the other one. Okay. Decision, can I give a suggestion, or is there something that I can recommend? Can I say something in support that, yeah, this is a good idea because so many other good things are going to come our way? Or can I go against it and tell them of a potential obstacle that might come up because you're going a certain direction? So, sort of, this is a checklist to go through in a way, so to see if you have everything covered. And especially support or obstacle, you always try to see if there's an impact on other departments as well. Okay, so if you're going a private limited company, you'll have more money. Operations will be able to bring in more machinery. They can increase their efficiency and output, and that's something that's also a good thing for a company, right? It has more status, which means that your shareholders might be able to bring in new shareholders who feel more confident about the company because of the new people joining in. So that's also something that creates, more for you to talk about. Market cap's full form is market capitalization. It is basically the total issued shares multiplied by the current share price. And you do that calculation to compare one public limited company with other. So whichever company has a higher market cap is thought to be a larger company. Now, no, we don't discuss each department. Talk about maximum to minimum one. No, not in too much detail. Okay. Okay, yeah. So first decision, should they become a public limited or not? So what you will say that I'd use words such as in evaluation or upon reflection, or finally concluding, things like that. Not in my opinion or I recommend. So in evaluation, I think it's sounds like a good idea, right? And then you back it up. Why is this a good idea? Because there's already high demand predicted. And how do we know there's high demand? Again, this was mentioned in the case study here that they conducted secondary and primary research that told them there's high potential demand for new touchscreen computers. So bring that into your discussion. There's high demand, and this is also backed up by primary research, which we've already conducted. And this would be a sunk cost if you don't do anything about it. So you make sure you drive that point home. Again, I think largely That's the word I want to use. Largely depends on. Who does this depend on the most? What do you think is the biggest factor of this decision? What we've seen in the case study. There you go. Very right, Orva. Excellent. So, finance is what we are doing it for, right? But what does it depend on? Largely depends on Maria. Because Maria has 55% of the shares. So, really, what does she want? Right? And in the question, in the case study, they told us that she is the one who's recommending this to the board. So maybe it has a uh, higher chance of getting through or getting approved. What she can also do, and you can mention, is that she can retain the largest shares, largest shareholding, and that way she can still have control and still get in more money. And what I can also mention here is that there is no choice because competition is strong. So really you can't sit on your decisions. Secondary research already told you that this is high in demand. So your competitors will also definitely go for it. So control we've discussed, money we've discussed. Anything else? Yeah. So it also includes paperwork and all of that stuff, plus finance for banks and stock exchange and things like that. And it also exposes MLC to sharp sharp changes in share prices. Okay. Um, and maybe since the question's talking to us about the transition of going from private to public, I could maybe have a statement here on private limited company that they could uh, could remain private, but it will be with limited growth, right? And PLC might attract other serious investors. Helps with what's written after help with wait what's written after retain. Where's retain? Yeah, could remain private, but obviously MLC will have limited growth, and becoming a public limited company might attract other serious investors. So basically, your image getting better. Here, I'm talking about the uh, image. Largely depends on Maria. Basically, what does she want? She can retain the largest shareholding, so she can still have, let's say, 30%. So let's say, for example, 30%. That's still big enough so that she has a lot of say in the matters. And yeah, so just the detail, the depth of evaluation will depend on two things. One, obviously, your understanding of the case. Secondly, the amount of time you have left, especially if it's the second of the 12 markers. That clock will be ticking much faster than it would be taking an hour earlier than that. So yeah, it's a pretty detailed, I think, answer about everything that you should be including. And that's the paper, guys. I think the only part left is part C, which is one of the more straightforward ones. I would recommend you do it on your own. But if there's anything about this, any questions, I'd be happy to take them again. Zoom in to evaluation. Yeah, is that okay? Everybody else okay? A lot of silence, viewers here. I appreciate if this was a theater, but it's a classroom. So I just want to know if you're okay. So do we include both pros and cons of both? Um, no, Baran, like I said, the private limited part, you don't discuss the advantage and disadvantage because that was already in the past. The owner, Maria, told you, look, we're becoming a public limited. Tell us what's right and what's not right about it. So just public limited. BB, so this pattern is what I recommend is what you should be using. Again, the amount of paragraphing is up to you, your own writing style, but this is what I feel very comfortable with. I've already shared the recording link on Google Classroom, so you can access it from there. Could you scroll up to disadvantage? Yes, I could. There you go. Understood, sir. Understood, Fatma. A case study you are going to do before, and so we can do them before class. Okay, so what I can tell you is that my next case study, which would be what's today's Thursday? Tuesday. So next Tuesday, I'll be doing 2024 June paper 2-1. So the first variant of the 2024 June series. I don't, and I'll probably be doing the first case study. Yeah. Love it. It's easy. Yes, 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 yes. I am loving it. So, give me mention power. I think Arva, the only thing I haven't mentioned in here, like the and this, but that. Okay, what do you call that? Prepositions? No, what's the right English term for all those words? Sample. Look, I don't have all the sample answers for all the sheets, so I'll try to go through the list. If I can find it for some of them, I'll do it. Look, again, I've asked again my team today. They're sitting right there looking at me. Team, hello, team. Dropbox link is not working of the business recordings. So your message has been relayed to the person in charge. I will look into it again. Sorry, I've just been told that you should have access to it, but I'll find a different solution. In information, so no, Abu Ghani, in evaluation, you have to help them get closer to the decision about whether becoming public limited companies are good or not. You're not going again backwards in discussing why being a private limited is good or not because they already are a private limited company, so they know what it takes to be one. Okay. Yes, Michelle, I'll take a look at it today. Okay. Grammar. If you're asking whether your grammar should be correct or not, no, it's not necessary. You should just be able to get the point across. Oh, okay. Whoa, those words. Grammar. I guess. Okay, I guess. Keeps answering very. Okay, so I'm caught up. Thanks, guys. I think that's it for the day. So you guys can leave. Thank you for being here, making this interactive and fun. I'll see you now next week. Actually, no, tomorrow is Friday. There's a class tomorrow, so see you tomorrow at 5. Okay, take care. Bye bye. You're welcome. I love this.